Hi, sir.
Hello, can I request mute, please, and then when it comes to Q&As, you can unmute and ask questions. Thank you. Okay, can you guys confirm you can hear me loud and clear? You can just give me a wave. Excellent. All right. Okay, so let me start by welcoming, everyone who's on the Zoom call and anyone who's coming in via Facebook or YouTube to this maiden edition of Conversations with Bassey. And this is being done under the auspices of the Cross River Movement. So, the conversation series is a fortnightly series where we discuss things about Cross River State, so things affecting Cross River State. And, this edition, we are discussing the Cross River State 2022 budget, tagged the budget of conjugated agglutination. So joining me on this conversation today, we have three panelists, and I'm going to introduce them not in any particular order. I'll start with, we've got Mr. Kenneth Asim, and Kenneth is the Executive Secretary of the Calabar Chamber of Commerce, Industry, Mines, and Agriculture. And this organization represents the organized private sector in Cross River State. So Ken, we're glad to have you as a panelist here. All right. Our second panelist here is Mr. Otu-Ita, who is a special advisor to the governor of Cross River State on the budget. So, he's going to be speaking to us from, the government angle, telling us exactly what this budget is about and representing the government here today. Our third panelist here is Mr. Efio-Ita Nyok, and he's the publisher of Negroid Haven, and he's a blogger, and there's also a social commentator. And we brought him, he's here today sort of representing the ordinary Cross Riverian, as it were. So the budget is an interesting financial plan that is meant to impact on the economy of the state. And the economy is made up of different sectors, and we've got all kinds of people who are stakeholders within Cross River State. So it'll be interesting to know how the budget impacts on these people. All right, so please join me in welcoming these three gentlemen to the conversation this afternoon. And there was actually a comment on Facebook, or no, I think someone forwarded to me on WhatsApp, and it was, hey, how come we don't have a lady in this panel? So I think next time we will be sensitive to make sure that we balance that out. But yeah, so just join me in welcoming them, and thanks to everyone who's joined this conversation this afternoon. So I will throw some questions at the panelists, and I expect that everyone on this call, or some people on this call, would have questions. So if you have any questions, just indicate by raising up your hand, in Zoom. If you're on Facebook or on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment there, and we'll try and pull them together and ask those questions to the panelists, before the session is over. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And so I think we'll start with a question to the special advisor. One of the things that we seek to do in the Cross River Movement is to bring the government closer to the people of Cross River State, and vice versa. All right. Now, the budget is a financial plan created by the government to improve the economy of the state and ultimately to improve the lives of Cross Riverians. So I think this first question goes to the special advisor to the governor on budget. Can you sort of walk us through the processes involved in creating a budget, and particularly the 2022 budget. So just tell us the process that the government went through in creating the budget, so that people who are not really aware of this, would know what goes on.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's already evening. Good evening, everybody. My name is Otu-Ita. I oversee activities at the budget office here in Cross River State. The budget process has a calendar, and basically what the budget office is required to do is to make projections. And how do we arrive at these projections? The first thing we do is that we accept forecasts from individual MDAs, telling us your plans, a 3-year plan, and that's we captured in what we call the medium-term expenditure framework. And when we receive this medium-term expenditure framework and their medium-term sector strategy, we consider them and put them in a single document and present it to the citizens. And that's where we have what we call the Consultative Forum. And during the Consultative Forum, we allow very key ministries, departments, and agencies to make presentations to the public, to set the direction, to inform the public about the direction of government for the coming year. So basically, that is the process. It is after that is done that budget office will now begin to break down the medium-term expenditure framework as submitted by MDAs to now arrive at what is called the annual budget.
Okay, Mr. Otu-Ita, thanks very much for just walking us through that briefly. So I think my next question would be, so where exactly are we in terms of that cycle? Where exactly are we with the 2022 budget?
Okay, as I speak with you, I'm speaking right from the Cross River State House of Assembly complex. Right now, we are actually doing the budget hearing. We're actually hoping that within this week that the budget should be passed by the House of Assembly. So we are almost in the last lap of the process of the budget cycle. Okay,
so should we expect that the budget will be passed before the end of the year? I think we just have less than
yes. Yes, definitely. We are really hoping that the budget will be passed within this week. Week, because.
All right. Okay. Thanks very much. I think I'll throw one more question at you before I bring in the other panelists into the conversation.
Okay.
The budgets of, I think the budget for 2022 is called, what's it called again? The budget of conjugated agglutination. Now, we know that, Cross River State has had some, budgets with very fanciful names. So in 2018, we had kinetic crystallization. 2019, we had the Kabbalistic densification. In 2020, we had olympiotic meristemasis. And then in 2021, or rather for 2022, we have conjugated agglutination. So my question to you is, what does this mean? What does conjugated agglutination mean? And in the eyes of the government, what is the impact of a name on the outcome of a budget? So what's a name meant to be when it comes to whether a budget is successful or not?
All right, thank you very much. Basically, it's very important that they establish that the governor of Cross River State, His Excellency Professor Ben Ayade, is a scientist. And if you look at all his budget, basically, he has actually tailored them along the science is a semantic. So for the 2022 proposed budget that the SSLSC had, the conjugated agglutination, what that simply means in economics is like saying a budget of consolidation, a budget of togetherness. Because if you look at the literary meaning of conjugated and agglutination, it has to do with things coming together to form a whole. So the idea of conjugated agglutination it's simple. His Excellency is looking at all the industries that he has constructed since inception in 2015 and making sure that all of them work in 2022. So that's just basically what conjugated agglutination is.
All right, thanks very much. I'm going to throw it open now to, okay, Kenneth Asim-Ittah. So your organization, the Chamber of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, essentially represents the organized private sector in Cross River State. So my question would be, the SC has outlined the process for the creation of, the budget. To what extent is the chamber involved in, shaping the budget of the state, considering that the chamber represents the organized private sector in the state? Kenneth Asim-Ittah? Kenneth Asim-Ittah, can you hear me? I think he might be having some challenges with. With his audio. Okay, so while we wait for Kenneth to sort out his challenges, maybe I will throw a question at Mr. Nyok, who is the publisher of Negroid Heaven, and there's also a social commentator. So my question to you, Mr. Nyok, is, what does the budget mean to the Common Cross Riverian? The 2022 budget, what does it mean to the Common Cross Riverian?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bassey, and good afternoon, everyone. Just as it has been said, my name is Efio-Ita. I'm a publisher and a social commentator. Actually, reacting to the question, what the budget mean to the average Nigerian that is indigenous to Cross River or resident in Cross River, I want to be very candid, and what I mean by that is I don't really know I cannot really tell what the budget, which is the appropriation law, would mean to the average Cross Riverian, not because the budget itself is not meaningful, but because of a particular dynamic which I want to highlight. First, one of the challenges we have in Cross River, which is not a Cross River challenge, but it's a Nigerian challenge, and Cross River has its context, is there's a kind of political apathy. You understand? The average Nigerian citizen is less interested in what public officers, what the public sector do. They don't. They may know that we are in a democracy, and then we are supposed to be involved with elections by casting your votes, being involved with political parties and all that. But they seem not to know that. They seem not to know the exact responsibility of the public offices, public institutions, and all that. So on one side, there's political apathy, and that's why you see there are so many shenanigans that takes place, like vote selling, vote buying, and all that. So recently, while on radio, I said that we are in a double tragedy. There's a problem, and the problem is two-pronged. First, we have a set of citizenry who are not interested in what politicians do, except to solve their personal problems. Maybe somebody going to the house of the senator representing him in the Senate, or the House of Assembly member, to ask for basic needs, to solve their problems, their personal problems, maybe ask for money, pay their school fees. Those are the kind of problems. Those are the kind of problems that the average Nigerian, who is also resident in Cross River or indigenous to Cross River, go to engage the government about. Anybody going to the house of the commissioner, for instance, is not going, if for instance, you don't see the average Nigerian asking the commissioner for finance, what's the budget? What is in it for us? Why did you arrive at this? If they meet the commissioner for finance, for instance, if they meet any other commissioner, they are asking him, Oga, anything for the boy. That's what the average Nigerian is asking. Now, that is aside, and that is elementary. I was now making the observation that the second leg to this problem is we are struggling with political realities. we now move into something that looks more complex than that politics, which is economics, which is what we are talking about now. We are not talking about the appropriation bill, we're talking about the appropriation law. The average Nigerian doesn't even know the processes that goes into that particular law being crafted, conceived, deliberated upon, and assented to by the governor of the state. So for them, the best that I have seen as a journalist, as a social commentator about the crossover budget is the name. It's in the name. From beginning from 2016 through till 2021, the best I have seen the average Nigerian, the best I've heard, the best I've perceived and felt about the budget is because the budget is crafted or christened in a highfalutin word or highfalutin phrase. So if not for the fact that there is a budget of deep vision in 2016 or a budget of conjugated agglutination in 2022 or budget of blush and bliss, for instance, in 2021, the average Nigerian may not have known that the budget has been passed, and this is what that budget means to them in terms of practical day-to-day economic realities. But as it were, to address the question directly what that budget means, that is the first law that is assented to by the governor, and it's about the most important economic instrument because it tells the government is telling the citizenry by that particular budget a story that this is what we will be spending. This is what we estimate to spend. This is how much we estimate to spend. How we apply that particular money. This is what we will be spending in the health sector, for instance. Now, let me not speak over our head. Let us look at the 2022 budget estimate. That's the bill, the budget of conjugated agglutination. It has been proposed by His Excellency the Governor that he wants to spend, he's estimating that we will spend 276 billion naira. Of this 276 billion naira, 101 billion will go for recurrent expenditure, and then 175 billion will go for capital expenditure. Beyond that, he has made emphasis on the capital expenditure, which I think I should bring to the notice of this particular forum and then cross-reference generally. The governor has said this year, the budget of, for 2022, we will not have new capital projects to execute. However, for the capital expenditure, we would rather be completing the capital projects we did not complete in previous years. And I'm assuming, because he did not state it clearly, that beginning from 2016 or 2015 when he came on board to 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020, including 2021, all the projects, all the capital expenditures which we could not succeed in actualizing, we will actualize them in 2022 through the 276 billion budget of conjugated agglutination. Probably that is why he called it conjugated agglutination, because he's anticipating.
Okay, I think we've lost the.
He's going to carry that. He will be carrying up that he did not succeed in executing in 2016 through to 2021. So that's what that particular budget means. It means all the failures of 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021 will be corrected in 2022. That is the conjugation, and that is the agglutination. So what it means is the average cross-reference should sit tight and watch how those particular projects will be implemented. And if I were to take His Excellency the Governor seriously by that particular pronouncement, what that means is that the super highway, for instance, which His Excellency the Governor had promised that he was going to execute in 2016, 2017, will now be executed. The Bassey Deep Seaport which were not implemented successfully, probably because of whatever backlog, all of them will now be conjugated, agglutinated, and executed in 2022. That is the import of
thanks very much. I think we generally get the general point. We'll come back to you, but let's give the essay the opportunity to respond. So you made a point, which is that it appears as if from the name of this budget and from the governor's comments that, in your opinion, this budget really is about correcting the failures of previous budgets, because we know that there's been capital expenditure on several different projects. Is it that, I think your question is it that the money appropriated did not complete those projects? Now we're having to have a budget where the entire capital expenditure is going towards completing projects that were previously appropriated for. So I think I would give the opportunity to the SA budget to respond to that. So, SA, so if you can just tell us, we have projects that were previously budgeted for, how come we're now having to complete these projects with a new budget?
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Iso. Listening to Efio-Ita, I was smiling all through, because Efio-Ita actually highlighted that most cross-riverians are not actually interested in the budgeting process and do not even know what the budget seeks to achieve. But to be very honest with Efio does not also know what the budget is all about from his comment, because when I made my first remark, I did mention about MTEF. MTEF is the medium-term expenditure framework. MTEF is actually a rolling plan. Basically, it's just a 3-year rolling plan where government will make projections, say, okay, within this period, this is what we want to achieve, this is what we want to achieve. And then when we are looking at also the inflow, the revenue that comes into the state, there's absolutely no way government will dedicate all of our revenue to building only project. We have several other activities that government need to execute, to spend money on. And for the mere fact that we don't have this money piled up somewhere, so it means that government will now have to do a careful distribution of these resources to carry out the expenditure. So for the projects that were conceived at the inception of this present administration, the administration of Professor Ben-Ayade, I think what the administration did before I joined the government is that they were working on what is called an NTEF. So these factories were built in phases and paid for based on milestone. So there's just no way the government will say, okay, in this year, this is what we are going to build this factory. Government will never have such money to just build a factory. So there's a rolling plan. So the rolling plan, from what I have come to meet on ground, is that government had planned that by 2022, all of these projects will be at their completion stages. So that is what it is, that most of the projects that were initiated, that were beautifully initiated by Professor Ben-Ayade, the governor of Cross River State, are now on their completion stages. And then Efio-Ita had also mentioned the superhighway and the deep sea port. I know that these projects are very, very dear to His Excellency the Governor, because anytime the Governor speaks about this project, he's looking at giving Cross River State a new life. The projects, the superhighway and the deep sea port, as they well, if you follow the conversation on the superhighway and the deep sea port, the position of the Cross River government has always been that we are looking for investors. Because if you look at the project, what it will cost the state to execute such a capital-intensive project, Cross River State may not have such money. So if you look at all the billboards, the one you find in Abuja, the one you find at Lagos, you always see the beautifully pictures displayed, and then the Cross River State government will now say, we are asking people to come and invest in this project. But the basic things about the feasibility studies of the project is actually what the Cross River State government is handling. But even as I speak, I know that the government of Cross River State is doing so much about the foreign direct investment, and I know that there are a lot of investors that have indicated interest to fund this project. We are also hoping that since it's not just a state affair, we're also hoping to get all the backing, all the support that is required from the federal government, specifically the Federal Ministry of Finance, to enable these investors come to our state to invest in this project, the Spyway and the Seaport. It's actually a possibility for us in government.
Mr. Otu-Ita, thanks very much. So for anyone who's just joined us within the last, I guess, couple of minutes, so this is Conversations with Bassey. This is organized by the Cross River Movement. And so we've got three panelists here today. We've got Mr. Otu-Ita, who's the special advisor to the governor on budget. We have Mr. Efio-Ita, who's a blogger and the publisher of Negroid Haven. And we have Kenneth Asim, whom I'm going to try and bring into the conversation at this point. Ken, I don't know if your audio, if you can hear me, and you can unmute yourself and just say something so we know that you're here. Kenneth Asim. Ken, if you can try and unmute yourself and let's know you're part of this conversation, please. Okay, all right. So there are a few questions coming in on Zoom, and while we're giving Kenneth Asim time to sort out his audio, maybe I will jump to those questions. And if anyone else has a question, just feel free to post it on Zoom, or if you can raise your hand, we may give you the opportunity to ask your question directly. So the first question we have is, what plans are you, and I think this is directed at the SA budget, what plans are you putting in place to get Cross Riverians interested in the budget? And I think Efio-Ita touched on this as well. And I think he made a very good point, which is that, when people engage with their elected officials or, appointees of government, it's not usually so much about, hey, what's going on in the state. It's more about, I have this problem, I have this need, and I need you to help me solve that. But I think that's just the reality. And I don't think that this is peculiar to Cross River State at all. But, how can we change that? How can we get the citizens more engaged in not just the process of creating the budget, but, participating and, after the budget has been passed, working with government, holding government accountable to ensure that the dividends of the financial plan in the budget is realized for the common man. So Essie, I will throw this back at you. How can we get Cross Riverians interested in the budget? Because I think I agree with Efio-Ita that people are just not really interested.
All right, thank you very much. I don't know how the government will be able to get people to be interested in the budgeting cycle and in the budgeting process. But I also feel that it will be very, very appropriate to just be the right thing for people to do, for people to get actively involved in the budgeting process. It will be the right thing for people to do. And on the part of government has been doing regular updates from our meetings with the stakeholders, from consultative to what we call the citizens budget. I know people like Efio-Ita, I can remember in our last consultative 2022 budget consultative forum, I can remember that Efio-Ita participated in that meeting. So it's just a statement of fact that very few people are interested in the budget. Probably, as you also said, people are more interested in the new. But when you're looking at the Cross River State budget, we have tried as a government to ensure that all information that has to do with the budget are uploaded online to the public. We try as much as possible to publish this report on time and regularly too. So it is just left for the citizens to assess this information. But as it is, I don't think if citizens are very satisfied with the information that they look at online, or they are not just interested in the process of governance.
Okay, just to take you up on the point you raised about the accessibility of the budget. Personally, I looked for the budget. So for the 2022 budget, I understand the 2022 budget hasn't been passed into law. So maybe, so maybe there may not be a published copy as yet. But I, from personal experience, would say that the budget is the Cross River State budgets seem to be very difficult to come by. I looked on the state government website, and it was not published on the website. I finally searched on, I think it was the Cross River State internally IRS website, and there I was able to find something. So it does sound like there's definitely a lot of scope for government to make efforts to make the budget more accessible to people. Would you agree?
Certainly, you're very correct. You're very correct. And that's why we're using the budget office is using the Internal Revenue Service website as an alternative, because we are actually working on a portal as it is, because we feel that all budget activities should be hosted. Can you hear me?
You broke out for a couple of seconds, so if you can just
yes. Yes, what I'm saying is that right now the construction of the budget office website is ongoing, and we are using the Internal Revenue Service website as an alternative at the moment. We are just hoping that very soon we'll have an independent website where all budget activities will be.
Okay, that's great. But can we pin you down to a timeline for that? When should Cross River expect to have that up?
I'm very sure that the 2022 budget will actually be on the budget office website by January 2022. We are looking at having a website that is very secure. So we're looking at hosting it on the .gov.ng platform. So if we're actually looking at just having another website, I'm very sure before now would have been done. But we're also looking at the process of getting the necessary certification to host it with Galaxy. So I think that is just the little things that we're just trying to do. And we are very hopeful that before end of January 2022, the budget office will run an independent site.
Okay, thanks very much. Kenneth, Asim, Ittah, I don't know, are you able to participate in this conversation? Would like to hear from you. Kenneth, Asim, Ittah, if you can unmute yourself and let's know that you're part of this conversation, please. Okay, maybe while we'll still give Kenneth time, we hope that he can join the conversation. There's another question here that I'd like to ask, and I think this again goes to the essay. It says, someone says that it would be nice to know the percentage completion of these projects. So I think these are the projects that are meant to be completed in next year's budget cycle. So it would be nice to know the percentage completion of these projects, and that are billed for completion next year, and at what stages are these projects today. So it would be nice to get some specifics if you're able to give us that essay. So what are these projects? Where are they today? And obviously we're anticipating completion next year. Maybe you can just give us an idea of these projects and where they are today.
Oh, okay. While you were speaking, I know there were a few breaks from my end, but I want to. From what I got is that you're asking where the level of completion of all of these projects.
Yes, correct. So where are they now, and then what stages are these projects at now?
I think most of the projects are just waiting for weight commission. Most of the projects, because if we're talking about let me mention a few. Like the Kalachika is up and running. The Kalachika is up there. That's the chicken processing factory. has been completed, it's running. The Kimisi, the noodles factory, has been completed. It's just waiting for wet commissioning. The rice mill at Ogoja is completed, waiting for commissioning. I know the cocoa mill also at Icom is completed, and I think sometime about 2 months ago, some bars of chocolates were being produced at that factory. But for most of the projects, I know that most of the projects are about 100% completed. All we're just waiting for is just probably to put a few things in place and have the way commission. And all of this has been accommodated in the 2022 estimates.
Okay, Essie, but I have my question to you then would be, because you mentioned a few projects there, and it sounds like those projects are complete. The question then would be, what is 176 billion capital expenditure for? Surely that cannot be only for the commission of those projects.
Okay. Can I make some comments now?
Yes, please.
Okay. If you look at where most of these factories are being sited, there are no proper road. They are not accessible. They are not accessible. And one of those things that the government is looking at is how to make these factories to be very, very accessible. And if you're looking at, that's why the government is building a road linking, proposing that in 2022, we'll do everything that we can to make sure that we have access road linking all of these industries. And beyond that, let me take like Kalachika, for instance, where we're having about a 170 billion naira as capital expenditure. While we know that most of these projects have been completed and just waiting for wet commissioning. We're looking at like the rice factory. Government is looking at that we don't have enough rice farmers, and if we don't have enough rice farmers, what it means is that the factories will not be able to work optimally. So part of this 170 billion naira that has been proposed will go as form of grants to encourage people in poultry farming to feed Kalachika, to encourage rice farmers, to encourage people in cocoa, and to also use it to make sure that we have access road to where these industries are being sited. That's why, and if you're looking at it, the money is just big in figure. When you're also looking at the cost of implementing some of these programs, they are relatively very, very high.
Okay, that's it. Thanks very much for that. We have someone who has their hands raised up, Arabia Ato. So if you can unmute yourself and then go on with your question. It looks like Kenneth Asim-Ittah is ready to come into the conversation. So maybe, yes, Arabia, if you can just go on with your question, and then we'll bring Mr. Kenneth Asim-Ittah to the conversation. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ittah, and thank you to the essay. I have just 2 questions, basically. The first question is, what mechanism does the government have in place to make sure that these grandiose budgets are actually implemented and implemented correctly, or even before they're even implemented, that they are not padded or things like that? That's my first question. The second question is, do you think it is wise, being the person in charge of the budgeting, do you think it is wise to engage in grandiose projects that don't seem to be working? For instance, we talk about the independent power plant that has not even been able to power the streetlights in Calabar, and many other of such projects. And we are talking about, it seems the government keeps making up new things to spend money on. You didn't think about the bad roads before you put a factory in a certain area and all those other things. So do you think it is wise to spend money on these grandiose projects when there are other basic amenities that are unavailable to Cross Riverians, which you could spend even little money on to get them up and running? That was my question.
Thanks. All right. Essay, if you respond to that, please.
Oh, all right, thank you very much. I know the last question is on power plant and street light. I don't know if I'm correct.
Yeah, so I think
basically, you can. That's just one example.
Okay. Can I comment now?
Sure.
Okay, it may interest us to know that the power plant is actually working. I think the power plant is about a 22 megawatt station. The street light in Cross River State right now are being powered by the power plant. And what the Cross River State government is using, or the Ministry of Power in Cross River State is using, is just about a 2 megawatt to power the street light. So what it means is that every day we lost about a 20 megawatt. And the reason why we lost this energy is because our power plant is not connected to the national grid. So that is why we are not using the 22 as we should, and we're only using 20, only 2% to 2 megawatt to power the street light. And that's why you see the street light every night is on in Cross River State. And to say that the power plant is actually not an important project, I don't want to agree with that. The idea of the power plant, if you look at the business case surrounding the governor's idea of having all of these industries, we are already aware of the power situation in Nigeria. And the government of Cross River State is looking at the situation where we will have dedicated power to feed the industries at the industrial park. So we're looking at, even in the year 2022, that we'll be able to, using I think there is a pile and pillion factory in Akampa, that we're looking at getting a fresh line to transport power to the industrial park. For those of us who are very familiar with a place that is called Creole, that used to be called Creole. Creole was sited is in Akampa. It's actually a rubber plantation. And in Creole, they had this kind of power plant that the government of Oyade has put in place. The idea is that the power plant will be what will be used to power the industries at the industrial park. So the power plant is a very important component of the projects that have been cited in Cross River State, because we will not be depending on the public power supply to feed our factory. If we do that, then we will not be able to run these factories optimally. We will not be able to do that.
Okay, thanks very much for that response. I think, Ken, you're fine to come into the conversation now.
Thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me now.
We can hear you loud and clear. Yes, it's good.
Okay. I think the challenge basically was technology, and well, thank God we've been able to overcome that. But what it has done is that it has enabled me to be able to get a view, hear what every other person has said, and it will give me a holistic, response in terms of my view. Now, the key thing for me in terms of the 2022 budget is the fact that, first and foremost, the budget has been done properly for the first time in a long while. We're actually looking at a budget that is within the confines and the capability of Cross River State to handle. We're not talking about the budget that's running in trillions, but we're talking about something that's within Cross River State's ability to manage. But my concern is that the focus of the budget in attempting to complete all past projects of this administration, I think they have not thought that through very, very carefully. Because if you look at the figures involved, look at the state of the uncompleted projects, then you know clearly that this budget will be unable to handle all of that. Now, in terms of meeting the needs of all the others, we do not have a very, very clear details of the budget so far. Yes, we know that about 38%, being 106 billion, is going into recurrent expenditure, and about 61% of it is going into capital expenditure. When you look at 61%, we're talking about 170 million plus. Now, the question, 170 billion plus, the question you ask yourself, would that be able to complete the uncompleted projects? Now, have they prioritized which uncompleted projects they intend to complete this year? Or are they attempting to complete all of that? Now, all of this information is not clear to us sitting out here. So that is why we still have a bit of a question mark on the ability of the budget to meet its expected. Now, if we do take a little bit of hindsight, look at last year's or this year's budget, 2021 budget that's about to round up, which was about 240 billion revised. You find out that even as at December, even at the end of November, they have not done up to 40% of that budget has not been implemented. So the question you ask yourself, will they now be able to do even up to 50% of the 2022 budget as projected? In the history of Cross River State in the past 6.5 years, we have not been able to meet an average of 25% completion of all our budgets over the past how many years? Now, our fear again, what guarantee do we have that this year's 2022 budget will be able to meet even 50% implementation? Now, that is the bane, that is the biggest challenge that we have. And of course, the fact that we are not able to clearly see what social infrastructure, what social service that government is intending to do. Now, we are talking about services that meet the common man at their point. We're talking about health, we're talking about education, we're talking about the wash sector, water sanitation and hygiene sectors. If you look around Calabar right now, it's a far cry from the Calabar we used to know in terms of, so what are government plans inside this budget for all of this? We need a little bit of clarity on all of these matters for us to be able to understand whether this budget is actually capable of meeting the economic growth and development aspirations of Cross River State or not. In my view, I think this budget, like every other budget in the past, is just a paperwork, because in the past, government has set out budgets, but they have never followed those budgets to the letter. That is, that's my initial opinions for now.
And thank you. We can see the passion there, and I'm regretting why we were not able to bring you into this conversation earlier, but it's great to have you. So Essie, I think Ken has raised a very important question. Yeah, if I look at the sort of revenue figures for the state, and I think this probably is 2019, so it's probably not up to date, but I don't think it will be much different from this. So if you look at total revenue for the state, it's about 60 billion. IGR, maybe about 123 billion, FARC, about 137, billion, about 36 billion. Putting all that together, we have about 60 billion naira as revenue, annual revenue coming to Cross River State. How then, how is Cross River State going to fund a budget of 276 billion when the revenue, annual revenue for the state is just about 60 billion? It sounds like magic. Tell us how you guys are going to do that, please. And I think that's the clarity that Kenneth is asking for. So we're not just talking about something on paper, but we're actually talking about something that gets implemented in reality.
Okay, thank you. I think when Ken was actually speaking, I was out of network coverage. And then, so I'll speak basically on your comment that you were talking about the expected revenue for 2022. And you did mention that when you were looking at statutory revenue, you're looking at FARC about 36 billion naira, and plus or minus for statutory revenue, including the IGR, internally generated revenue, that we are looking at about maybe about a 70 to a 77 billion naira, and then we have a budget size of 276. For us as a government, we know that government doesn't have all the money to carry out all the programs. And one thing we know as a government is that if we get our processes right, we'll be able to assess budget support from the banks. And when I say the bank, we're looking at the World Bank here and other multilateral organizations. So in our 2022 budget, we are actually proposed that since we are actually putting all our financial instruments in place, so that will be appreciated by the banks, that we are hoping that they will be getting about 100 billion naira capital receipts. And those capital receipts could also come in through a foreign direct investment. And we're also looking at financing our 2022 budget through the refinancing of our loans. Because as it is, Cross River State is in a very terrible condition, but the government is doing everything to see how we can source for revenue, for adequate revenue to finance our 2022 budget. But you're very correct when you mentioned that looking at our statutory revenue, we're running a deficit budget.
Okay, so in reality, so if we have a deficit of say about 200 billion, I think that's what it sounds like, because if we have about 70 billion coming in, 200 billion, you know, it does sound very much like, you know, Cross Riverians don't have that much to be optimistic about. But we need to be wrapping up this conversation.
No, okay, let me say something. You know, most of these activities that the Cross River State government has budgeted for are being supported by counterpart funding, like the WASH program. We expect like RAM, rural roads. We're actually providing a component of the 170 billion naira provision for capital expenditure. Is actually a contribution from the Cross River State government, because we're also expecting so much from the international communities. But that will only achieve when we have our books properly kept and the support of our citizens. And for keeping our books very straight, I think the government of Cross River State is doing our best to keep our books straight. And we're also looking at individuals like you, like the Chamber of Commerce in Calabar, also supporting what the government is doing and educating the public about the activities of government and letting us access some of these grants, because the bank mostly do not rely on what the government is saying alone to fund our activities. They also rely on what the citizens are saying. And if the citizens are not reporting correctly, if the citizens are speaking based on assumption, then it becomes a problem to us.
Okay, let me, in sort of wrapping up this conversation now, let me bring Efio-Ita on now. So, you know, based on what you've heard from the essay, how optimistic should the common Cross Riverian be about the 2022 budget? If you can just give me your comments in a minute, and then we'll go to Ken Asim-Ita, and then we'll sort of wrap this up. You're muted. You need to unmute yourself so we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry. I have so many things to say, but I will just do that in just a minute.
Take 2 minutes. Take 2 minutes. Okay.
To respond to the question, how optimistic the average Cross Riverian should be? Maybe the Cross Riverian we are talking about will be myself, yourself, Ken, the SA budget, because I don't know the points I made is still very valid. For a community that has high rate of political apathy, how does such a community or society come and look at technical economic realities? You understand? Now that's on one side. Two, being optimistic, the budgets, I dare say that our budgets in Cross River State, perhaps beginning from the inception of the Fourth Republic, that's beginning from 1999, has not been a democratic instrument. Democratic in the sense that it does not encourage participation of the citizenry. Let me come down to facts. Let's look at the 2022 budget of agglutination that intends to address some kind of infrastructural deficit. The budget wants to talk about, is saying, Obudu Cargo and Passengers International Airport will be completed. The British Canadian International School, I think still in Obudu, will be completed. The Odupani Junction flyover as well as others, according to a news report, they say will be completed. Are these the problem, the fundamental teething problems besieging cross-riverians? Now let me tie it to the MTEF. That's the medium-term expenditure framework that Ita made reference to. The last time we had a medium-term expenditure framework was 2017. The one that lasted from 2015 to 2016, 2015, 2016, 2017. I can cite a 2017 premium terms report where the current Speaker of the House of Assembly was Chairman, House Committee on Finance, where he gave the governor in 2017 30 days to present his medium-term expenditure framework, which is supposed to roll for the next 3 years, 2018, 2019, 2020. That document, I cannot find it. So based on what assumptions, fundamental assumptions, is the government of Cross River State making the annual budget? On what assumptions?
Okay.
You understand? On what assumptions? That is the challenge I have. So that budget is not a product of consensus. It's not a product of participation. Of the okay, yes. Let's allow the SA bring the MTEF 2018, 2019, 2020, and then this the one that is covering 2021, 2022, and 2023. Let him provide the MTEF, because the last one I just saw is just only 2021 in the website of Ministry of Finance. Just 2021. Is that an MTEF? MTEF is 2000, is 3 years rolling plan. I think
okay. Thank you. Efio, do you want to respond to that briefly, just in a minute?
All right, thank you very much. You cannot have an annual budget without an MTEF. And as Efio-Ita said, as I earlier mentioned, MTEF is just a 3-year rolling plan. So it's a plan that you keep publishing every 3 years. And in that plan, you also have what is called a fiscal strategy paper. And basically the MTEF and the fiscal strategy papers are instruments that is used to guide the preparation of
Hello, SA.
Like, my sincere apologies that that if you have not cited the copies of the 2021, 2023, and 2022, 2024 MTEF, but I think a visit to budget office, we will be able to look at those documents.
Okay, Kenneth Asim-Ita, I'm going to, just throw this at you, and maybe this would also be your wrap-up remarks. The organized private sector in Cross River State that you represent, how optimistic should they be about the 2022 budget?
Did you say optimism?
Yes, I did.
Okay, well, for now, I would tell you that the business community, optimism is not part of our vocabulary right now. Because our past experience with Cross River State government and the way they do things just show that there's nothing to be optimistic about with this administration. Now, Efio-Ita raised some issues, which I don't want to delve into. But basically, I want to now point into another thing. You remember that, Mr. Saw, you participated in that. We developed a 30-year development plan for Cross River State, which the private sector was key in contributing to that document. That document was launched. That document was meant to direct and guide government in all its activities till date. But I dare say, and I can tell you this, and I can dare the SA to correct, prove me wrong. Cross River State government has not followed one single plan or activity on that growth and development strategy. It's a 30-year. So your MTEF basically was supposed to be lifted from the projections from the growth and development strategy. Now, whatever you produce now as an MTEF and whatever you're using, the basis which you're using to develop your budget is not in line with that growth and development strategy. So the question we begin to ask ourselves, why do we go into exercises that we know actually that government has absolutely no interest in using, in utilizing, or in participating objectively with? Now, another key issue is some of the projections they're looking at in the 2022 budget, they want to complete this, they want to complete that. Like Efio-Ita said, most of the things government is looking at are not things that are going to impact the common man, which is going back to answering the first question which you asked, Efio-Ita: how optimistic should the common man be? How optimistic should the business community be? We are not, because from what we see, the basis for everything should grow from is not in place. The basic infrastructure that we need is not being planned for. The basic drive, the basic policies and plans of government is not tallying with what should drive development and economic growth for Cross River State. Basically, this is what should help. Now, before now, the private sector used to be very, very keen on seeing what the budget is, because it's based on that you develop your own plans and strategies from. But these days, sorry to say, we just wake up and decide, what are we going to do for ourselves and how are we going to do these things for ourselves? A lot of the things that the private sector, most organizations are now doing, are things that the private sector are collaboratively trying to do together for itself, not what the government is providing the direction or the enabling environment for business to thrive. So I think what we need more is that transparency and that sincerity of purpose from government to address these basic issues. We are not looking for any grandiose or project activities. Do the basics. Do the basics. The people will take it up from there. If government doesn't do the basics, then it's difficult for the business community to pick up from there and to drive economic growth and development. The key thing Cross River State is facing right now is the lack of jobs. Now, we cannot provide those jobs when the basic infrastructure, the soft infrastructure needed, the regulations needed to drive the economic sector are not in place, are not there, are not helping businesses to thrive. The tax regime is one of the most stifling that any business community in Nigeria today is facing, coupled with what the federal government is currently bringing out. Now, we see a lot of illegal taxations going on. Government is doing absolutely nothing to correct these challenges that the business community is facing. They're not doing anything to correct these problems that the individuals, the people are facing. The governor came on board last time and talked about tax exemptions. Yet, the tax authorities are still going around and collecting levies, fees, and taxes from small businesses. Now, wherein lies the coordination between the governor's executive order and implementation on the field? These are the challenges that we face, and these are the things we actually want solutions and action from the government, not some grandiose names for fancy names for our budgets and all of that. We used to have budgets in Cross River State itself, for crying out loud. They never had fancy names, but they worked for the people. That is what we want. That is what we want right now. In terms of optimism, we don't have.
Okay, thanks, Ken. Thanks very much. That's I think that's a very candid opinion representing the organized private sector in the state. Essay, it does sound to me, I think, we're 5 minutes over, the time we anticipated spending on this conversation. In maybe what I would do in fairness, I would just give you a minute to just respond to Ken, and then we'll try and wrap this up.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Ken is not being very fair to the government of Cross River State, because if you're looking at all the most of the projects that are being constructed by the Ben-Ayade government, they are basically for the people. If you're looking at the Kalachika will promote poultry farmers. If you're looking at the rice seedling, it will encourage people into rice farming. If you look at the chocolate factory, the cocoa factory, it will encourage people to plant more cocos. If you look at almost all the projects that have been impacted on by this very present government, everything is tailored to support the organized private sector. And then I think we've actually been speaking more about completing all of the projects. And it's important that I mention that the 2022 estimate that is currently being deliberated at the State House of Assembly has also made provisions for social protection, is a gender-sensitive budget. It's also addressing issues on climate change. So it is not just about the budget per se is not just focused on completing the ongoing project. But we are also doing so much in education, we're doing so much in health, we're doing so much in climate change, we're doing so much in gender activities. So for me, I think this is a budget for the people. And the governor of Cross River State is determined to ensure that the lives of Cross Riverians will be improved in 2022 by the projections we are making. A budget. Thank you.
Bassey, thank you. Thanks very much for that response. We'll have to wrap this up. We can go on and on. The truth is that there are so many questions coming in, but I think that a conversation like this is nice to keep it short and sharp. So I want to thank panelists for coming on board today. We've had a lot of passion on this conversation. Thank you, Kenneth Asim-Ittah. We wish you had been able to join us earlier in this conversation. Efio-Ita, thanks very much. You spoke passionately and identified with a lot of the things that you said. I'll just read out a comment that I think emphasizes the value of a session like this. Someone says, I just learned about this meeting. Insightful and engaging. Hope we can engage this way soon again. Cross River State needs a reawakening of its social conscience, and a transparent, accountable, inclusive, and participatory budget is a key plank for making this happen. So I think that from this comment, as well as other comments that have been made during the course of this conversation, it's clear that there's an appetite on the part of the people of Cross River State to engage more closely with the government. And I believe also that it is in the government's interest to engage with citizens. Let the people own the budget. Let them own the projects that the government is coming up with. And the only way that can happen, I think, is if the government is more participatory. Without wanting to lecture, Bassey, I think that there are some points that you can take from here. I think it would be nice if the budget is more accessible. Someone made a comment around, presenting the budget in formats that people can easily digest. I guess maybe that's similar to the sort of thing that an organization like Budget does. Budget, I think, has really, really helped the common Nigerian to better understand, government financial planning. We would love it very much if the state can embrace something like that. It would help people to identify better with the budget. So let me thank everyone once again for joining in this conversation. And this happens to be our maiden edition. This is going to be a fortnightly series. So you will hear from us about the next conversation taking place on the 2nd of January. And this is brought to you by the Cross River Movement. The Cross River Movement is a non-partisan, organization, an NGO, and all we're seeking to do really is to, bring Cross Riverians together to conversations like this and through other platforms as well, so as to be able to define a brighter path for our state. So I'll encourage everyone on this call, if you've not signed up on the movement, visit www.crossrivermove.com and sign up there. And we want to work together for the development of Cross River State. We want to work together as Cross Riverians and lovers of Cross River State, and also in partnership with the government, because truly no state or indeed no society can develop, can be expected to develop simply through the effort of government. So we need to join our hands together. So I'd like you guys to, follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/crossrivermove, instagram.com/crossriver.move, and Twitter @crossrivermove as well. So I'm going to wish everyone here a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we look forward to having you all on the conversation on the 2nd of January. Thank you very much to our panelists again. Ken Asim-Ittah, thank you very much. The essay to the governor on budget, Mr. Otu-Ita, thanks very much for joining us. And finally, the publisher of Negroid Haven, Mr. Efio-Ita, Nyok, thanks very much. And I wish you guys a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me, sir. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
We'll definitely have you guys on the conversation again, because I think this has been, I think there's a lot more that we could have gone into that.
I think one edition is not enough for us to clearly, and